We're back in the tackle room, and today we're talking about the secret baits every pro angler has on their boat, whether they admit to it or not. Stick around, you don't want to miss this one.
One eye hook. There we go. That's a better one. That's a better one. Stay pegged. Oh, that's a better one.
And here is this video's featured comment. Congratulations! If you would like to have a chance to have your comment featured in an upcoming video, all you've got to do is leave a comment. And now, on with the video. Welcome back to Lowbrow Fishing, and it's no secret that pro anglers, when it comes to the choice of their baits and their lures, they can pick from the best of the best. Whether it's $100 lures or whether it's $5 lures, they get a choice of the cream of the crop. They get to pick and choose which ones that they want based on their sponsorships, right? These guys all have sponsorships with big name bait companies, Rapala, Berkeley, Strike King. You know, they're the guys that are out there representing those brands. And if you go on their boats, well, you're going to see boxes full of brands from their sponsors. And they will be throwing them publicly. You will see, you know, them throwing a Strike King, or they'll be throwing a Berkeley, or whatever brand that they're sponsored by. Whenever the cameras are on and somebody's watching, you can bet that's what they'll have tied on. However, a lot of times you'll see that those pros are trying to be a little bit sneaky. They don't really want you to see what they've got tied on. That's because regardless of brands, there are some old school and new school favorites that kind of overlap. These are the baits that, you know, whenever the company made them, they really hit it out of the park. And all these pro anglers have them tied on, regardless of who their sponsor is. And that's what we're talking about today. Baits that are so good, so renowned, that if you want to get a check in a tournament, you better have these tied on and sitting on the front deck of your boat. These are baits we've all heard of, but you may not know how popular they are with a lot of the pros. And, you know, some of them are obvious, some of them are going to be a little bit more obscure. So let's go ahead and get into it, and we're going to start with the first one. And the first one, well, it's not going to be any surprise to a lot of you, you know, and that is a jackhammer chatterbait from Z-Man. This is the South Blade. You know, I mean, I don't throw these that often, but I do have a few. This one here is still in the package. But you'll see guys, regardless of who their sponsor is, they'll be tying on a Z-Man chatterbait. It doesn't matter if they're sponsored by Berkeley. It doesn't matter if they're sponsored by Rapala. It doesn't matter who they're sponsored by. When it comes to throwing a chatterbait, chances are they're going to be throwing a jackhammer. And it's probably the most important version of the chatterbait, even though they can be quite expensive, $16 or $17. A lot of times, you'll even see them throwing the cheaper versions, although they probably don't want you to see them doing that. Those $4 and $5 versions of the chatterbait, they also catch fish just fine. As a matter of fact, I have quite a bit of success on those cheaper versions, more so than I do the jackhammer, believe it or not. But regardless of who the sponsor is, you're going to find pros are going to be throwing not only jackhammers, but Z-Man chatterbaits in general. Now, next up is a newer bait on the market, but one that is really taking the bass fishing world by storm, especially those pro anglers, and that is a Berkeley Stunna jerkbait. Now, I have several of these, and they're not my favorite jerkbait, but I can absolutely see why a pro would like using them. They're very steady in the water. They're very predictable to fish with. You're going to get the same type of presentation over and over and over again. And for a pro, that's exactly the type of bait that they're looking to throw. The weight transfer in these, you know, I mean, it's not as great as I would like for it to be. I have a harder time casting these out than A lot of guys do, and I tend to fish a jerkbait. When I'm fishing a jerkbait, I'm doing it on a spinning combo, not a bait cast, although, you do you. If you're more comfortable fishing a jerkbait on a bait caster, that's what you feel is working for you, then continue to do that. For me, it's a spinning combo. That's what works best for me. I feel I'm getting better bites and better hookups with a spinning combo. But to that end, this guy right here, these aren't cheap. They can run you about $15 or $16, but still, as far as jerkbaits go, that can actually be very middle of the road as far as prices, especially when you have ones like Megabass Vision 110s and things like that are going for $20 and $25. And it doesn't really matter, who your sponsor is, what the decal is on your boat or the brand logo on your jersey. I bet you've got one of these in your tackle box, and when nobody's looking, you've got this tied on and you are throwing this out there and you are catching some toads on it. Now, next up is not really going to be that much of a surprise. It's something that a lot of topwater guys cut their teeth on. And if you're fishing in the summer, well, you've got to have one of these on your boat, whether you're a pro or not. They just catch fish. And in the summertime, when you've got those bass chasing shad and you see them busting around you all over the places, those bass have become more focused on bait fish during the summertime. Well, a head and spook is definitely what you've got to have tied on. Now, there are all types of walking baits now. We've got, jaywalkers, and we've got sexy dogs. And don't get me wrong, those are fine baits. But this guy right here, this is the original, and if you ask a lot of people, this is still the one that does it best. And pros, again, regardless of who their sponsors are, I've even seen a lot of them admit to it. They've got a head and spook on. And it's one of those things that the name is universal, right? I mean, whenever you're talking about a spook, it can be a jaywalker, it can be a sexy dog. You're talking about a walking type of topwater bait. And that name, spook, has become synonymous with that. Whenever you do that in the industry, well, you've got to be doing something right. You've got to have something that's working. And, not just the smaller spooks, but even like, the old one knocker, the saltwater spooks. There's so many different variations, the baby spooks, and they're coming out with new types all the time. And, the one knocker is probably the tried and true favorite of everyone. This is probably the one that I use the most and probably have the most amount of success with. But as I said, this is another one that the pros, regardless of who their sponsors are, this is another one they're going to have tied on and on the front deck of their boat at all times. Now, before we get to the last one, there's a couple of honorable mentions. A few years ago, these guys would have made the list, but as times change, we've kind of moved away from them a little bit. And first on that list, well, this little guy right here. This is a Rebel minnow. And for a lot of guys, this was the first jerkbait. This was the one that they had, the one that they cut their teeth with. They've been around forever. And I know a lot of guys still have these. I know a lot of pros who still have these and still use these. Your older pros, the guys who are basically the senior circuit now. However, this is still a great bait and one that you should not sleep on, one that still catches a lot of fish, especially whenever guys are throwing a lot of Megabass or Berkeley baits. This can actually be a good change of pace bait. It's smaller, it's got a different swim, a different vibration, and it's been a long time since the fish were inundated by these over and over again. So, again, this is something you don't see as much of anymore. They've kind of lost their popularity, but that's not a bad thing necessarily, right? This is still a great bait and one that you should actually definitely have in your tackle box. And of course, another honorable mention, one that I toyed with having on this list. I really thought about it, but then it was basically the same thing as that Rebel minnow, and that is this guy right here, a Bill Lewis rattle trap. We all grew up throwing rattle traps, right? Whether you're a weekend warrior casting from the bank or you're in the elites or the BPT, this is a bait that you've got somewhere on your boat. However, with all the new technology and all the new things going on, I don't see guys throwing a lipless crank, especially a trap, as often as they used to. When I was a kid, A trap was the deal. It didn't matter if you were fishing from your little dinghy boat rowing out in the middle of the lake, or if you were casting around docks, if you were fishing from the bank. This is what we threw. We threw a chrome-colored Bill Lewis rattle trap. And I actually have quite a bit of an affinity for these. These are actually, kind of a good memory for me, as I remember summer days on the Fox chain of lakes, things like Fox Lake and Petite Lake. We fished these quite a bit, as well as net spinners, and these were great baits. We actually caught quite a few fish on them. Although back in the day they were all the rage, now not so much. So that's why they're only an honorable mention. And now, the number one bait that I can guarantee you that every single pro angler, from the lowest BFLs through the Toyota Series, up through the Invitationals, the BPT, the Opens, the Elites, I can guarantee you they've all got this in their tackle box, and they are using it right now in the summertime. What is it? A Rebel Pop Art. These things they're the best poppers around. These things have been around forever. We all use them. We all have them, and with good reason. And the pros are relying on these. They don't want you to know they're relying on these, but these are exactly the poppers that they're throwing. Whenever they're trying to target structure, target laydowns, and they have an isolated spot that they're looking to work a topwater, they're using a Rebel Pop Art. That's the ones that they're using. And you have so many different types of poppers right now. And granted, they are good. There are some really good poppers, but you just can't beat an old Rebel Pop Art for a lot of things. And for nostalgia, this is the one that we all know. This is the one that we all grew up with, and they still get it done even after all these years. So there you have it. 4 baits that I can promise you every single touring pro has on the deck of their boat at some point or other during the tournament season. They're proven bass catchers, they are proven winners, and those baits help them cash checks. They're great baits that you could also have tied on, and the best part is most of them are pretty inexpensive. So if you get a chance to, if you haven't tried them, I suggest doing so. Thanks for watching Lowbrow Fishing. We'll catch you in the next one.